you're already doing enough. The guilt is proof that you care, not proof that you're failing. You don't have to be the perfect parent, you just have to be the perfect one. Welcome back to another group coaching call. Awesome week so far. Some of the feedback we've had on the confidence challenge has been amazing. Parents sharing their wins, parents sharing their struggles, their breakthroughs. Some really great wins around language, around routines, around developing habits. We're already starting to see some of the breakthroughs that we would expect at this point. So awesome job, keep it up. The questions I've got today, I think you're going to really like. They are quite deep questions, and a lot of them are around connection with our kids and how that might evolve and change. So let's get started. First question. From Mrs. Taylor, I feel like I've lost connection with my teenager. We used to be close, but now it's eye rolls, silence, or attitude. How do I rebuild that bond? Now, this is probably quite a typical thing for a lot of parents as they go into those teenage years. Don't be worried or surprised if this happens. It's not a reflection of your relationship with your child. It is a reflection of what they may be feeling or going through. As you can imagine, huge shifts, hormonally, but also at a time where they're experiencing more pressure socially, academically, and so on. They also might be going through some huge transitions like changing school, which they typically see around that 11-year-old period, right? First thing is don't chase connection. A lot of parents see this and they start chasing connection, and they ask their child more and more questions to try and, get them back, win them back. But the reality is they just push them away when they do that. You want to try and create quiet space for that connection to return. And that might sound strange, but just try it, right? Create the opportunities where that connection can return. So, you might walk with them, or you might do a sport with them, or you might just be there present while they're experiencing that emotion, okay? While they're experiencing whatever it is they're experiencing. If you're trying to chase them and always asking them, what's wrong? You're just gonna create this divide, right? So just being there, if they're going through it, they need to know that you're this present energy that's always around them. So that's the first thing. Try to swap lectures for curiosity. I've spoken a bit, especially on my YouTube channel, about lectures and lessons from parents creating a divide, when really what they want is connection with you, right? So there is a big difference there. Listening over lectures is probably the best way to explain it. You saying to them, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. Why are you upset? All this sort of stuff. Instead, you can just say, you seem a little bit off today. Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to just hang out? You seem a bit off today. Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to go and kick the ball around outside? Or, do you want to, doing something with movement sometimes really helps. Or even, you seem a bit off today. Do you want to just watch a movie together? What you'll then find is halfway through the movie, they may start opening up because you haven't forced them to do it. The next thing I would say is side-by-side activities. They really, really help. Having a shared mission, even if it's very small. That could be a car ride, cooking, walks, sport, whatever it is. You're trying to remove the spotlight on them and put the spotlight on something else. So you're both looking at the same spotlight, right? You're looking at the energy is on something else, not just on them. A teenager feels pressure 10 times more than most people feel pressure because they internalize everything. So take the spotlight off them, put it on something else, and both focus on something else. You're then united, focusing on something else. That will create connection automatically. Like I mentioned, listen more than you respond. It's validation that's going to open doors faster than advice. So when your child does finally start speaking to you, you want to validate their feelings. I totally understand why you feel that. Rather than giving your opinion on something so they feel judged. Have you ever given your genuine opinion on something and your teens just turned around and given you a negative response? It's because they felt judged in that moment, right? Create that space so they can build that trust with you. And the way that you do that is you validate their emotions first. So as soon as they do start speaking, I completely understand why you might be feeling that. Later on in the conversation, you can say, I felt something very similar when I went through this. Now, only if it's appropriate. Again, you don't want to double down on sharing your experiences, otherwise you just make it all about you. Okay, and that can build resentment. Remember, trust isn't built through big talks. Trust is built through consistent, calm presence. So, don't think as a parent, yes, you're their mentor and you're trying to teach them about life, but don't feel like you need to give them a big lesson every time. One of the biggest things you can do is just being that calm, consistent presence in their life. If you have a teenager and you're losing connection with them, they're rolling their eyes, they're avoiding you, they've got attitude, there's silence all the time, don't try and fix them or the problem. Don't ask them loads of questions and interrogate them. Focus on being this calm, consistent presence, and they will gradually open up. And when they do, validate their feelings, try and take that energy and that spotlight away from them and put it on something you can share together. In 60 seconds, that would probably solve most of the challenges parents face when it comes to connecting with their teens. All right, I hope that helps. Mrs. Taylor. Next one. Mr. Walters, my child shuts down completely when I try to talk to them about emotions. How can I reach them without pushing? So first of all, leading with vulnerability really helps. So explaining your own emotions so they understand that it's normal to talk about emotions is really, really key, especially if you've got a boy. They will then understand that emotions aren't weakness, right? They don't necessarily see you as weak. So when you start talking about your emotions, saying, I felt sad doing this or frustrated doing that, and now I don't, I would always try and provide some sort of solution afterwards. So it's not just a negative, you're not wallowing or trauma bonding. You're talking about how you experienced these things, but now you experience these positive things. Try to drop the agenda when you have a conversation, right? Your kids are going to open up when they feel safe, not when they feel forced. So this follows on quite nicely from the last question, I feel. You'll notice that your kids have signals. So it could be, art, music, humor, whatever it is. And these signals are basically entry points to connecting with you, right? And sometimes they work better than words themselves. If you're trying to connect with them on something, make that something fun and engaging which they enjoy. Even play Xbox or PlayStation with them, whatever it is, right? If you find something they're really keen on, Minecraft, right? Let's say you've got a teenager who loves Minecraft. Just play Minecraft with them for half an hour, see what happens. And while you're doing that, you might find they start opening up about their emotions, and suddenly you're in this position where emotions don't feel like this foreign thing that we don't talk about. They're not shutting you down, they're connecting with you. It's all about connection. The emotions follow afterwards, whereas I feel like a lot of parents get it the other way around. They try and find out what the emotion is and try and fix the problem and then try and connect with them. Similar to the first question, the more you try and chase the solution, the more you push them away sometimes. And then finally, saying to them that you're reflecting what you see, basically, right? So you're saying to them, look, you seem off, you seem upset, but I'm here for you whenever you're ready. That's the bottom line, basically, isn't it? And it's that consistency, that consistent calm presence that we spoke about in the last question. Consistency builds the safety. So silence today doesn't mean disconnection tomorrow. If you're really worried that your child's quiet around you all the time, that silence doesn't necessarily mean something really bad's happening. It could just mean they're trying to process something. What they don't need is for you to, run in, rip it all apart and try and create a scene from that. Just being around them will help on its own. We're now going to talk about growing up in a home where emotions weren't, welcome or talked about. So this question here, Mrs. Lopez asked, I grew up in a home where emotions weren't talked about. I don't even know how to model emotional regulation for my kids. Where do I start? I can imagine there are lots of parents, especially kind of millennial era parents who have boomer era parents themselves, who go through this, right? In the past, emotional repression was really typical. Within parenting, we've gone through this stage in the past where it was all about obedience, right? That was the key thing, obedience and compliance. Now we've kind of shifted, and for a lot of people, it's gone too far. We've doubled down so much on the emotional side that we talk about the feelings so much, we avoid pressure, and now we've kind of robbed our kids of being able to operate with pressure and with high levels of emotion and with emotional composure. But there's this beautiful middle ground, right? That you could say there's gentle parenting, which was a great idea and a great improvement from the kind of emotional repression and the obedience and compliance side. But then it's gone so far, for some people, it's got into permissive parenting. But all these different parenting styles have their benefits. But for me, I feel like good parenting has never really changed, right? If you look at great parenting, remove all the fads, it follows the same values, the same systems in terms of what they're trying to achieve, and the same kind of rules where they develop resilience. That is the goal. They just go about it very different ways. But ultimately, you want your children to be able to fully appreciate and experience the full spectrum of emotions without it being something which prevents them from acting, prevents them from showing up. And obviously, if they're not able to handle their emotions and they repress their emotions, so many terrible things happen, like the damage to their mental health, their inability to handle pressure, and so on. So what can we do? What can we do if we have grown up in a home where we didn't have, where emotions weren't talked about? So start with naming the emotions, first of all. I'm feeling frustrated right now. Simple, honest, no drama. You don't need to go into details, right? And actually, as a parent, if you struggle with this yourself, do it in your own time. Try to become really, really good at naming the emotions you're experiencing. Try to take ownership over your reactions. That came out sharper than I meant is a great one, right? So imagine you spot yourself reacting in a certain way to your child or even a colleague or whatever it is, and you should practice this as an adult in general. You snap quite quickly. That time between making a mistake because you were fueled by emotion and having some sort of action, which could be snapping quite quickly, try to really repair that very quickly. So saying something like, that came out sharper than I wanted to, let me rephrase, right? Something like that shows deep emotional intelligence, in my opinion. It shows an understanding of your emotions fueling your actions, and then you taking responsibility of that, and then course correcting. Showing emotional recovery is a really good one. If your kids see you emotional, and they see you acting emotionally, but then they see you pausing, breathing, and reflecting, you are modeling emotional recovery, and they're going to copy that. That's an incredibly powerful step. The next thing I've got down here is replace perfection with repair. So ultimately, you want to teach safety, right? You want to repair mistakes you've made as quickly as you can. Again, it's that modeling aspect. What can I do to actually teach my child how to do the same thing? How do I want my kids to deal with heightened emotions when they've made a mistake? I guess the bottom line here is you are a human being. You've got your own past, your own experiences, both positive and negative, your own trauma. Every human being does. What your kids don't need is an expert. What they do need is a human who can show them how to human, right? And a big part of that is showing them the ups and downs, but showing them how to correct it. I think vulnerability is great, but if you've been through a lot, and some parents say, I really want to teach my kids how to be resilient, so I'm going to share with them the difficult things I've gone through. That's all well and good for maybe your teenager or above. But if you've gone through a really difficult situation at work or with a relationship, whatever it is, and you're trying to articulate that to a junior who's 4 years old, it's just not going to land, and it's not going to hit the same way as with a teenager. So there is an age relevance here, which is really, really key. Your junior, and maybe even your senior up until about 8 years old, just needs to see you as a safety net. They need to see you as that safe security, emotional security. What they don't need is to see you going on an absolute emotional roller coaster all the time, right? And gradually later on, you can share with them the challenges you've gone through and how you've overcome those and how you've regulated your emotions and what you've done to repair that. And that will then develop a deeper sense of emotional regulation and emotional composure being important. But more importantly, as a human, you will have emotions. They'll go up and down, and your kids need to see you deal with those in the moment. So I hope that answers that one. It gives some of my perspective on what it's like to grow up in a home if you haven't, emotions weren't talked about, and how to model emotional regulation and how to approach spotting feelings, talking about feelings, and sharing those with your kids so that they grow up in a home where it is talked about. Okay, next question is Mr. Davies. I feel like I'm always the bad guy. Enforcing rules, saying no while my partner gets to be the fun one and it's wearing me down. That is probably something a lot of parents can relate to. Now, I think in a relationship, you typically have, if you're in, if there's two of you in the relationship, you're typically in a situation where you've got often a judge and a coach, right? This is one way of looking at it. The coach is, if you look at an athlete, a coach is always there day in, day out. This coach, it's like the caregiver. They're constantly there to help them with their diet, nutrition. They get an injury, they sort them out, all this sort of stuff. This coach is fundamental to making sure that this athlete stays on track and their basic needs are met. They're there to provide them with so much emotional security and safety as well, right? Now, the judge in this relationship is the person who comes into the life of the athlete and gives them something to strive for, right? And the athlete tries to prove to the judge that they can achieve something, and the judge then, tries to have high standards for them, and they then try and adhere to those. Now, a lot of people look at a relationship like this, but it can. This could be a father. Very masculine energy tends to be the judge in the relationship. The feminine energy tends to be the caregiver, right? That's not based on gender, that's just based on feminine and masculine energy. But what I would say is you can have this kind of balance a lot of the time, but it is quite difficult to manage that balance. In real life, people tend to move into these roles, and you can spot this in your own relationships maybe. But that doesn't mean to say that if you have the masculine energy in your child's life and you're constantly being there to do discipline with them, that you're not able to be the fun one with them, or even vice versa. So how do you approach this? If you want to try and have a more balance in your parenting style or in how you're disciplining your kids, how do you have more balance with this? Well, the first thing I would say is give yourself credit, because boundaries are basically love in action, right? If you remove all boundaries from your child, you're making them happy now, but you're making them sad later. So you're actually doing them a disservice. Kids crave boundaries more than people realize. Kids actually feel so much insecurity and anxiety when they don't have boundaries, when they don't have discipline. We've, in the Warrior Academy over the last 15 years, we've had kids come to us where they've come from homes where they haven't had a lot of rules, right? And they've never really had structure. They've never really been told, this is what you can and should do. This is a moral compass. This is how to behave. And over the weeks, initially there's some friction, and then over the weeks, you can see this relief filling their minds, and their emotions change around it, and this kind of anxiety they're experiencing dropping, because suddenly they've got direction, right? Kids need, they need to push the boundaries, and that's what kids do, right? They need to know what the boundaries are to do that, and if they don't, then they're just in this hyper-anxious state of not knowing where they stand. So boundaries are love in action. So give yourself credit for actually having boundaries. I think that's really important. And often if your partner is really permissive, then, and they let kids get away with everything, then you then have to step it up even more, right? So sometimes you do these conversations with your partner where you say, look, I feel like I am having to enforce such strict boundaries all the time to keep these kids on track. Can you help me with that? Because this is a team effort, right? If you're lucky enough to have two people in the relationship at home, it's a team effort. So, you need to try and make sure you're both singing from the same hymn sheet, you're on the same team together, and not having complete polar opposites, right? It doesn't need to be the judge and the coach. People might fall into those roles naturally, but it can be exhausting for parents if they constantly feel like a judge. If you're constantly disciplining your kids because your partner's so permissive, and you're in this situation where you don't feel connection with them, it can be a bit sad. You can feel a bit distance from them. So totally understand that. Partnership becomes a key thing. Then if your kids get older, one of the key things is bringing them on board when it comes to the decisions. If you are making rules in the house, make it feel more like a partnership rather than a punishment. We agreed this rule together, right? And we agreed this rule because we want to achieve this, or because we know that this is good for you or this is bad for you, or this makes people happy or unhappy. If your preteen or teen understands that language, then reinforcing that this is a partnership and they made a mistake or whatever, and this is the way that we need to course correct the behavior, not them, but the behavior, then that's going to be really key. So this should all be about a partnership, both with your partner, your wife or husband, but also with your kids, because they have helped you set the rules. Make them part of the rule-setting process. The next thing I would say is find moments to say yes again. You ever seen that film, Yes Day? You obviously don't want it to go to that level. Put that film with your kids, they might find it funny. And maybe you can relate to this if you're constantly saying no as a parent. It's basically a film where the mum was in this position where she's constantly saying no, and her kids think she's boring because of that. And so she makes a day where she has to say yes to everything. It's quite funny. Your kids might enjoy it. Anyway, I'm going off piste. Find moments where you can say yes again, because the connection with your kids can't survive on correction alone, right? To build connection with you, they need to have fun with you as well. So try and focus on that. What situations can you then create where you can be more relaxed and give them more freedom, more autonomy? You know, what can you do? A great thing I like to do is to say to kids, you plan the day today, right? So your kids will come up with 3 or 4 things that they're going to do that day, and you know you'll go around town doing that with them. It could be having breakfast here, going to play Lego with them there, or going to that park, right? Keep it simple, but you're giving them the autonomy, and you're the one saying yes to it. And that will make them feel so happy and connected with you, because they've then got this freedom which they're sharing with you. Finally here, I've got remind yourself that discipline and warmth aren't opposites, right? They are the same language, and they are just spoken differently. So discipline and warmth. You don't need to be cold when you discipline your child. You know, it comes from a good place, and that's what you should be focusing on. So, Mr. Davies, I hope that answer helps. We've got 2 more questions. Mrs. Grant asked, sometimes I lie awake feeling like I've failed, too distracted or too impatient, not enough. How do I stop carrying that guilt? All right, so the first thing around guilt is I really believe that the parents who are the best parents, bearing in mind I've worked with 50,000 parents around the world for the last 15 years, the parents who are the best parents are the ones who don't feel like they've cracked it yet. The best parents are the ones who have that element of guilt. That guilt means you actually care, right? So see that feeling of guilt as proof that you care. If you, let's say you got a job at work, and you are working on a project, and you've always feel like something's missing, or you haven't quite finished it, or you're worried about the small details, or you know, is it going to perform well enough? And this is your job, right? And that's what you're focused on. And if your energy around that is, I'm worried, or I've got this guilt that I've made a mistake, and it's like this, almost like a little bit of anxiety on that job or that project, that is because you care, right? You care deeply about that project. It's the same when you're raising your kids. You don't want them to make a mistake. You care very deeply about it. So first of all, recognize that guilt is proof that you care. It's not proof that you're failing. Just because you feel guilty about something doesn't mean you're failing. It means that you're actually thinking consciously about how you can improve it. So it's a very positive energy, right? It's a growth mindset. If you didn't care, there are parents out there who aren't doing a 30-day confidence challenge or a warrior method course, who just don't care. They're not interested in trying new exercises. They're not interested in the theory. They're not interested in how their child's brain cognitively develops. And yet you're sat here investing in your own education as a parent, a human being, and feeling guilty that you're not doing everything. Do you see the difference, right? One parent doesn't really care. One parent cares deeply. The guilt is proof that you care, not proof that you're failing. Reframe that. Replace guilt with reflection. So what would I do differently next time, right? So you're trying to create an action on the guilt. That's going to make you feel better in the moment. Apologize where needed. I've spoken a lot about apologizing. If you feel you've made a mistake on the spot, apologize. That's going to reduce that feeling of guilt as well. You know, you're using those moments of error to deepen the connection with your kids. Try to catch the small wins, not just on your kids, but on yourself, right? Where you did connect with them really well, where you did do things really well, where you did have the exercise really well. We ask our kids to have a journal where they've shown courage, or they've developed their confidence, they've had little wins, we're building momentum. But let's do the same with you. If you're feeling this sense of guilt, why don't you create a journal every day where you use the same theory, the same understanding, the same approach as the confidence challenge, but you do it with yourself, because we're trying to build your confidence as a parent as well, right? We're removing that layer of guilt by saying, I did this really well. You know, I mentored them through that time where they didn't want to go play football with the group at school because they were nervous, they wouldn't have any friends or whatever it is. I mentored them through that. I did a great job. They played, they loved it. I'm a great parent, right? Sometimes we need that self-talk to be improved ourselves, and a journal gives you evidence, undeniable evidence that you are a good parent. A lot of parents need that. So I would double down on that. And I would have this being your mantra. I believe that one of the most important things about parenting is that our kids copy what we do. And one of the beautiful things, but also kind of the difficult things about parenting is that if our kids copy what we do more than they listen to what we say, then ultimately to be a good parent, we need to just focus on being good people. And so the simple mantra that I want you to remember is I'm learning and that is enough. I hope that hits home, Mrs. Grant, because I think it will for a lot of other parents out there. Right, final question before we wrap this session up. Mr. Howard asked, my child blames themselves when I'm stressed. They say it's my fault, you're upset. How do I stop that cycle? So my child blames themselves when I'm stressed. So they talk about himself as a parent. So your child sees you as the parent stressed, and your child is saying that it's their fault, you're upset. Interesting. How do I stop that cycle? So your child at some point needs to understand that only you, as a parent, manage your emotions. They need to learn the lesson that no one else can influence their emotions. It's a decision that they make. They are in control of their emotions. Otherwise, they'll constantly be a victim to everyone else's influence to their emotions around them. One of the greatest ways that you can protect your child from bullying, name-calling, and so on, is understanding that if they want to feel sad, that is a decision. If they want to feel angry, that is a decision, to a degree, right? There are obviously big things that happen in our life which are immediately going to make us sad. So take this with a pinch of salt. But it is empowering. We're not victim shaming, we're empowering them to have more control over their emotions, to have a deeper understanding of their emotions. And that starts with modeling from ourselves. Try to reassure them with action, not lectures. So a calm tone, a steady presence. Just in general, that language and that presence just carries so much weight. So that's really important. I've spoken a lot about emotional ownership already. So I'm having a rough day, but I'll handle it. And this is how I'm going to handle it. It's not them that's making you sad or stressed, right? It's the external factors, and you're managing it, and you're handling it, and you're going to explain to them how you're doing that. The tools, the techniques, the exercises you're using to actually do that then become the tools, the exercise techniques they will use to handle deep, scary emotions as well. Try to praise their empathy, right? If your child is saying to you, I'm upset that I'm making you stressed, or I've made you sad and I'm sorry about that, or whatever it is, they're showing a deep level of emotional intelligence, right? I don't see the age of your child here, Mr. Howard, but you should be really proud that you're raising a child who's got that much empathy. So praise the empathy. That's a really powerful skill for a leader to have, or a human being to have, right? I'm really impressed that you noticed I was sad. Thank you for noticing that. That will go a long way. This could be their superpower, that they're able to pick up on emotions and that they care deeply. And finally, teach them this one truth. Your love isn't dependent on their behavior. Your love is constant. So whatever it is that they do, right or wrong, you're always going to love them. And that's what they need to understand. Because there is an undertone here, right? That the love you give them is dependent. They're actually worried that they've upset you and you don't love them. So you need to reassure them of that presence and that consistency when it comes to your love for them. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the questions today. Let's wrap this one up. Awesome week of wins for parents everywhere on the Warrior Academy Online. Let's take a bit of a breath together on this one because I feel like what we talked about runs very deep. Parenting isn't just about habits and routines and exercises. It's about heart, it's about healing. A lot of that is healing what we went through as kids ourselves so that we can parent better. I feel like we went very deep on some big topics today. I feel like so many of your questions came from that quiet space between love and guilt, where we all want to do better as parents, but we're tired, we're stretched, or unsure how to do it, or maybe we weren't brought up in the same way, and so we're fighting previous demons, right? All of that is okay. That is the actual work, right? So, the confidence challenge, you come in here and you expect and you want exercises to help your child become more confident. And then what I give you is loads of lessons and insights and introspective work to help develop you as a human being to become a better parent, to help your child to build their confidence, right? So it's an inside job after all, which maybe you weren't expecting. But hey ho, that is the beauty of developing as a human being and signing up to something that is challenging, right? It starts with us. We are developing the confidence and our own parenting ability. So connection was a big one today. Your connection with your child isn't lost in one argument, in one slammed door, or even one bad day. Connection with your child fades slowly and it then rebuilds slowly. It's rebuilt through presence, through patience, through small, consistent repairs. It's when you show up in a very calm way after all the chaos that human beings have experienced together. When you admit, I have reacted. When you listen without lecturing, without trying to fix something, that is what is going to heal trust with your child and deepen the connection. We talked about emotion and the uncomfortable emotions that you might experience, the anger, the shutdown, and the silence. I think the truth is your child doesn't need you to eliminate those feelings at all. They actually need you to know that the feelings are safe to have. So when they see you sit with your own sadness or frustration and they still choose kindness, that's what teaches emotional strength, right? So you're showing them that. Now, to every parent who's carrying guilt, let this one message land for you. You're already doing enough. Every time you reflect, apologize, or try again, you're changing your family's emotional story. Regardless of what life was like growing up for you, you have the chance to rewrite that for your kids. You're showing your kids that love doesn't mean perfection, it means repair, honesty, and endurance. That's the reality of developing a relationship with other human beings, right? So as you move forward, just try and remember this: you don't have to be the perfect parent, you just have to be the present one. You've got to be consistent, you've got to show up. The calm that you model today basically becomes their safety tomorrow. And that quiet love that they feel is the kind that shows up every day, even after the really hard moments, because that's what lasts and what will be carried forward in your child's life when they develop their own relationships. I hope that helps today. Looking forward to our next coaching call next week.